That the Russia-Ukraine war doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon is evidently clear now. But this also means something else. Yes, Ukraine's unending appetite for Western aid will continue. The West, led by the United States and the European Union, has made it clear time and again that its support for Ukraine is free of any terms and conditions. That means Kyiv can ask for whatever support it wants: military, financial, political, you name it, and the West will go out of its way to fulfill it. Why so, you'd ask? This is because the West, rather secretly, hopes that such support will reap dividends sooner than later in the form of Ukraine's victory and, more importantly, Russia's resounding defeat in this war. But such an approach by the West is creating a crisis for them back home, and they've realized it now. I think everyone is now sufficiently worried. A NATO official said this very recently. And definitely, NATO, the US, the European Union, they're all very worried. NATO held a special meeting of the alliance's arms directors on Tuesday to discuss ways to refill member nations' weapons stockpiles. To support Ukraine, NATO has almost put its own arms inventory on the line, and those inventories are now fast depleting. To solve a problem, you need to acknowledge that it exists in the first place. To be fair, the West has finally acknowledged this issue. Josep Borrell, the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, said, and I quote, "The military stocks of most European NATO member states have been, I wouldn't say exhausted, but depleted in a high proportion, because we have been providing a lot of capacity to the Ukrainians." You see, Ukraine doesn't care much about its allies' inventories. All it knows is that these countries own top quality tanks, missiles, and other weapons which help them immensely to fight Russia. Take the United States, for instance. Among the NATO member nations, Washington has provided the maximum military aid amounting to $15.2 billion to Ukraine. This includes the 155mm howitzers and long-range heavy artillery like the HIMARS. Ukraine dearly wants the supply of these weapons to continue. But there's one key problem with this assistance to Kyiv. The war-torn nation is finishing ammunition faster than it can ever be manufactured. According to Dave DeRoche, an associate professor and senior military fellow at the US National Defense University, 30,000 rounds for the 155mm howitzer take about a year to be manufactured. And how quickly is Ukraine finishing these rounds? 2 weeks. 14 days, that's it. Here, the West's glaring mistakes come to fore. It started giving aid to Ukraine without realizing the stress it will have on its own inventories. Before that, during peacetime, these countries in the West manufactured weapons at a very slow pace in line with their countries' needs. Ukraine's war meant all of it got depleted in a jiffy. Now, the US is left with two options: stop aid to Ukraine or continue to supply via its own reserves. According to CNBC, the Pentagon isn't keen on using reserves for Ukraine as that is meant for their own forces. A possible third option is this: scale down the quality of the weapons, essentially downgrading what you supply to Ukraine. So, if Kyiv has been getting the latest 155mm howitzer thus far, it will now have to settle for, say, the 105mm howitzer. Of course, downgrading a weapon means not only cutting corners on the specifications, but also a significant setback for Kyiv's plan to counter Russia. Do you think the West will be able to come out of this mess unscathed?